Okay, hello everyone. My pleasure to introduce Taro Yang, who is, as you all know, a MindCORE fellow. She received her PhD from OSU in psychology. Was really a leader in understanding decision making, particularly the cognitive processes that underpin decision making, which she explores by observing the movements of people's eyes, and I believe in this work, observing their think out loud uh, their thoughts as they think out loud. So yeah, please welcome Tara.
Yeah, thanks for the kind introduction. And my name is Taro, and today I'm gonna talk about some work related to open-ended decisions. So before I really talk about this like specific project, I want to spend like 1 or 2 minutes on like what I really study or like the overview of my research. So we face numerous decisions in our daily life, from repeated grocery decisions that we may make every week to important lifelong decisions, such as buying a house or choosing a job offer. Some decisions may actually take longer than others, and some seemingly easy decisions may actually feel more difficult than you expected. So for example, when you choose between a burger versus a salad, when you want both taste and healthiness, you may feel really hard time deciding. So how our brain resolve all of those conflicts and construct our preference is a fundamental question in decision-making research and also among a lot of other fields. So I studied the process of choice or the process of decision-making by observing how people search and then combine with computational models to uncover how people decide. So when options are accessible to us, we may make decisions by look back and forth at different elements in the option and then pick the final option. In that case, leveraging our understanding or measurements of attention, such as using eye tracking, can help us understand people's preference. In addition, I also bring insights from like cognitive models, such as sequential sampling models, to explain how are different pieces of information aggregated together and then results in our final choice. So this kind of model, they assume that people make decisions by gradually accumulate noisy information until a barrel is reached. This approach goes a little bit deeper than like standard descriptive statistical model and give us a better understanding of like how the choice is made and the underlying mechanisms of the choice process. So one example is that I use eye tracking to measure how people search among different attributes such as taste and healthiness, and then combine with sequential sampling models to explain the relationship between attention to health attributes and then weighting of the health attributes, and then how they reflect in choosing an unhealthy versus a healthy option. But we all often, like when we make decisions, options are not always accessible to us. So for example, sometimes we may rush into a fast food restaurant without even checking about what other available options out there. And what fast food restaurant we go for dinner, what grocery stores we go for shopping, we may face a lot of such open-ended, memory-based decisions in our daily life. Unlike menu-based decisions, where options are often given, memory-based decisions, they require an option generation process. So for example, when we are thinking about what fast food restaurant we go for dinner, different fast food chains such as McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, they may come to our mind while we are thinking about this choice problem. Those generated options are often called consideration sets. But how do people decide based on this consideration sets? One fundamental theory in decision-making research suggests that people generate a choice set first and then choose from this set. So basically, this model assumes decision maker will evaluate the option after they form in the choice set. In the example of fast food restaurant, people will generate a choice set such as McDonald's, Taco Bell, In-N-Out, and Burger King, and then choose their favorite item In-N-Out from this choice set. The alternative models may assume decision makers decide while they are searching through their memory. So for example, people may recall an option and then evaluate it and then recall another option. One very classical example here is satisficing. So satisficing assumes people like set a minimal threshold on what they are willing to accept or reject, and then people will search through their memory. When they find an option that is above the threshold, they will accept that option. In this kind of example, decision makers may not come to cases or options like Burger King while they have already decided to choose In-N-Out. So Burger King will not be even included in the consideration set. So in this project, what we hope to do is to test those two hypotheses in the context of open-ended decision problem with a model-based approach. So the first challenge we face is what options are considered. Here we use the semantic fluency measures to observe what options people recall based on a particular choice problem. And we also need to quantitatively predict what people will choose and also how long they are going to choose that option. So here we use the models from sequential sampling framework where we model it as a decision process, a dynamic process where evidence accumulates with a drift rate that reflects people's preference and the decision boundary represents how cautious a decision maker is. So imagine the case where we only have one option. The timing it is going to be chosen mainly depends on two factors. It seems this doesn't work, but depends on two factors or two mechanisms. One is the drift rate. So drift rate is the rate in which evidence accumulates. Basically that represents how much you like that item. So if you like that option a lot, or you like that option a lot relative to other options, you will choose it quickly. The other thing is the decision boundary there that represents how much evidence you need in order to make the decision. So for example, decision makers may recall different amount of evidence under different situations, such as under different time constraints. So for the search, then decide, or for the null model, decision makers may first come up with a choice set. Then all of the options in the set, they will begin to accumulate evidence at the same time, according to their drift rate. Here, options that have the higher drift rates are the better options, and they're more likely to be chosen. So as a result, conditional on being included in the choice set, the best options will be chosen very often. In contrast, in alternative model or the decide while searching model, those different options come to mind. They will start to accumulate evidence at different time points. So the first one will start to accumulate evidence immediately, and then the later ones will start to accumulate evidence later. So again, better options will have a higher drift rate, but earlier recalled options, they will have a head start. So that means options that have a higher drift rate, but starting later, such as In-N-Out, they might be dominated by the options that will be start earlier, but actually they are the worst option. They have smaller drift rates. So in the end, worst options, they might be chosen very frequently if they tend to be recalled earlier. So here we decide a 2-day within subject experiment to test those different models. In the experiments in session 1, participants, they make open-ended memory-based decisions. And after a week in session 2, we have participants that come back and then they conduct a semantic fluency and a rating task. So we did this experiment online on the prolific, and we incentivize subjects via gift card based on one choice they make. So specifically in this day one experiments or session one, subjects make open-ended choice where they will provide with category cues such as fast food chains, soda brands, grocery stores. Those are the daily categories which we chosen from our collaborators' work. And we record both like what they wrote and how long they decide, which we consider as response time. In addition to those free response trials, we also have like 15 trials, time pressure trials, in which case participants are encouraged to respond within 8 seconds. So the purpose of like those time pressure trial is to understand whether choice is influenced more than just by value. So as you might expected, like memory and value, they are correlated measures. One way we think we can test them apart or test whether they contribute to the choice process differently is to use this time pressure manipulation. So if we found that time pressure weakened the effect of the value but boost the effect of memory, then we can be more confident to say that like memory contribute to the choice that the value cannot explain. In addition, we also hope to see like whether later any of the model parameters they are sensitive to this time manipulation. So after a week, like we have 200 subjects, they return, and then they conduct 2 tasks. One is semantic fluency task, where like in this task, subjects list the items that come to their mind while they are thinking of the category cue. So those categories are the same as the first day. And after that, they will rate options based on how much they like the item. So the goal here is to use those measures from second day memory saliency and evaluation to understand how people make open-ended decisions in the first day's memory-based choice task. And we fit different versions of the process model under the sequential sampling framework. We model the response time as inverse Gaussian distribution. So the probability of making a decision at a given time is the probability that one option arrives the boundary and all the other options haven't arrived the boundary at that time point. So I don't have time to go through like all of the details about how we fit the model here, but we can definitely chat if you are interested in discussing this after the seminar. But one thing to note is we fit the model at the category level for in using Bayesian inference. So like we fit for each category. So to begin the results, I first want to show you like 2 patterns in the data that align with the idea that open-ended decisions, they are the outcome of a noisy process, because this is a very critical assumption of the sequential sampling framework. So in the left figure here, I plot the probability of choosing an item in the memory-based choice task as a function of the value or the rating of that item. So we found is that options that were higher rated, they're chosen more often. And in the second figure, in the right figure, I plot the response time of a given chosen option as a function of the rating of that option. So options that are higher rated, they're also chosen faster. So those 2 patterns suggest that open-ended decisions, like a lot of other value-based decisions people study, they are the outcome of the noisy choice process. In addition, we also look at how memory saliency influence choice. So x-axis here in this figure is the serial position of a given option in the fluency task. And the y-axis is like how likely they are going to pick in the open-ended decision. We see that earlier record options are more likely to be picked. And importantly, people mostly pick the first and second record option. In addition, I also take the differences between those blue curve and the orange curve to compare the choice proportion differences between time pressure and time-free condition. So for different record position and for different levels of value, what we found is first record option are more likely to be chosen under time pressure, while the highest rated options are more likely to be chosen under time-free. So that suggests that memory saliency and value, they contribute differently under different time conditions. Now, which process is more likely to describe those data? Do people search then decide, or do they decide while searching through memory? We fit the model and generate the model predictions using the estimated model parameters. So we found that the alternative model, which is the decide while searching model, can better captures the joint relationship between choice probability and response time. So here, the first result I show you is that we plot the probability of choosing an item in memory-based choice task as a function of the value of the option. The dashed lines represents the model fit, and the dots and arrow bars, they represent the the data. First, we found both models can capture the effect of value on choice probability. However, those two models differ in their predictions in how memory saliency influence choice. We found the while searching model can capture the choice probability for the earlier record option, particularly for the most salient option, while the search then decide model underpredict the choice probability for the most salient option. So this finding highlights that the significance of head starts or time advantage for the earlier record options in the open-ended settings. But how about the response time? So decide while searching model also predicts that earlier record options and also higher rated options, they will be chosen faster. So in the first figure, we plot the response time of the chosen option as a function of the value of the chosen option. And in the right figure, we plot that response time as a function of the memory saliency of the chosen option. So what we found is, so higher memory saliency basically is earlier record options. What we found, the model can capture that earlier record and higher rated options are chosen faster, and that is aligned with the data. In addition, the model can also predict the differences in choice proportion in time pressure and versus time-free condition. So in the figure here, in the x-axis is the observed choice proportion difference for different options or different brands between time pressure versus time-free condition. And the y-axis is the predict differences by the decide while searching model. We see there are a lot of variations in those measures in the x-axis. Those brands that are on the lower side, they are chosen more in the time-free condition, and those brands that on the higher side or right side, they're chosen more under the time pressure condition. So for example, brands that are quite salient, like Starbucks and McDonald's, they are chosen more under time pressure, and options that are less salient, like Reddit and Chick-fil-A, they're relatively less salient, they chosen more under time-free condition. And the y-axis is how our model predicts. And then we see that model is able to capture those variation in choice share between time pressure and the time-free condition. So in summary, we found that option that's recorded earlier and more favorable, they chosen more and also chosen faster. We provide a model-based evidence that consideration set or choice set, they evolves during the decision process in the open-ended setting. So that will challenge the traditional notion of static consideration set. Basically, we suggest individuals evaluate the option dynamically with a consideration set that evolves over time. And this framework also makes great predictions about what and when people will choose in open-ended decision settings and how people may behave differently under different conditions. I also want to highlight that although it's a theoretical work about modeling, but it's not only of theoretical interest. We can also use the model to provide a lot of like practical insights, such as how much will the choice share of an brand or option increase if we enhance its saliency. So lastly, I want to thanks for your attention, and thanks for my collaborators from UVA, UC Berkeley, and UCLA. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Taro, for a really interesting talk. In the search then decide model, are you allowing for like different starting points or thresholds for different items?
Yeah, so we in the model we fed in the end, we don't actually allow that, because if we think what we think is like after the like starting points is more representative of like a person's prior belief about that option. But like not until you start to like start the evaluation process, it's hard to argue why you have a starting point towards one option versus others. But I do feel the boundary might be a possibility, like for example, because of habits or because of like how frequent your exposure to one or the other option, you may have different boundaries. But yeah, but we didn't allow for such flexibility in this model.
The reason I ask, and maybe you can explain to me, is that I'm thinking how, what would the difference be between a model where you just search, what is it, decide while searching?
Yeah.
That one where like the different items start their accumulation at different points in time, versus a model where like they start at different points, or they have, you know, their threshold is lower. Like in each case, like those are sort of different ways of thinking about like item specific like head start, or item specific like differences in the distance they have to go to cross threshold. Like can you distinguish those models? You know, or what would the different predictions? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, so like one is decide while searching. If you think of like if you think about it is more about like different like when in and now start to be evaluated, other options can be think of like they already have a starting point in the decide while searching framework, right? But like you are asking alternative case, well, like in the search then decide case, like different options may have different boundaries, and then how we can distinguish between these two, right?
Yeah, I'm basically saying like if you allow for different starting points or different thresholds, like how much can that mimic
Yeah.
model that is, you know, where they start accelerating at different times?
I see. I think that depends on like how you, yeah, that first, like definitely if you make the model more flexible, definitely may like mimic with each other. But second is like I was thinking about like how you really determine why the boundary is different in the first search then decide case, and why they cannot be different in the decide while searching case. Like maybe like McDonald have a smaller boundary, and then why they cannot like be the same in both cases. So I definitely think there were ways two models may mimic each other, but I haven't thought of like how they reflect on choice probability and the response time. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. Some of the brands you were mentioning in your talk, I like very much. Some of them I really don't like at all. Like I really dislike them. And I was wondering what happens in this whole choice process if you ask people what they dislike.
So it's like, you mean like whether like they will recall. So like first, like they may recall dislike options, and then like if we go back to the experiment here, so we do have a dislike button for them where they can indicate whether they dislike an option or not. But like we do remove all of the dislike options when we analyze the data, and then they won't get into the evidence accumulation process. But like I do still feel like so basically and whether the other question is about the choice, whether people actually choose dislike options in the open-ended setting. I think we try we have different exclusion criteria, but we didn't find a lot about like whether, so we didn't have a lot of trials that people do choose the dislike option, but they do sometimes choose the low value options. But I do still think that's a very interesting point for like future research, like how the set of the option record change based on the question you ask or based on the Q choice problems. For example, when you think of dislike or the aversive options, like not exactly aversive options will come to your mind, but like appetitive options, they may come to your mind earlier. So like you may create a like anti-correlation between the value and memory in the case when you ask people what you don't like. But that's not the typical question we ask in daily life. But I'm still thinking like that might be interesting to look at. Yeah.
Why do you think the evaluation process starts at the optimal level? Would it be like you evaluate the attributes first and look into that?
So you are saying like whether they will like basically like for a given category, like choose a fast food chain, they will not think about the which like McDonald's first. They will think about some other attribute first. Yeah, that's a really great question actually. So I think some of the work Sudip has done previously, like with Joyce, they have been look at like how attribute evaluations during the memory retrieval process and then how those are like aggregated into the choice process. That's a related work, I think. So I think actually I don't really know about this to answer this in this project, but I do feel this is a very interesting future research we can do here, because if you think of like the evaluation is not starting at the option level, then when people start to like think about what to choose in the open-end settings, the option may not be even emerge when people start to evaluate at the attribute level. So how that will like change the people's choice process and often or even the memory process is a very interesting point, I think.
And some of the talk of trying to distinguish between the search on the side, diagonal searching for the model, and it seemed like a lot of your ability to do that hinged on a single data point in one of those plots that you showed. I'm just curious if you, in the last data plot that you showed, if you flip back, did you make that with the search on the side?
So this one, yeah, we do. It's more flattened
So
basically.
that's another way.
Yeah. There are different ways, like also they differ in a response time predictions, but I think memory salience is the one that like differs them most. So yeah. Thank you.
How do you think exactly that the processes happen in parallel but independently?
Parallel but independently. Oh yeah, so like we specify different rules in the accumulation process. One is absolute rule, which like they do happen in like independently. And so the like if you like McDonald's a lot, it will just like the difference is also just depend on the McDonald's, how much you like McDonald's. But the other is a relative rule where like the difference is depends on McDonald's and also all the other items like already considered. So that's a different rules we considered. And the model with the relative rules is actually perform better. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's all.
Yeah, I think we can switch over.
Yeah, thank you.
We're gonna go ahead and
For the presentation?
yeah, we'll start it and then we'll go back on Zoom and share. Also,
Go out again, maybe? Or do we have to stay in here? Yes, it's remarkable.
Right, I think we are close enough on tech for me to introduce. I am delighted to introduce Fabian Baumann. He just joined us as a MindCORE Fellow in October of last year. Previously, he was a postdoc at Max Planck Institute for Human Development. He's earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in physics and his PhD in theoretical physics at the Humboldt University in Berlin. And he will be talking with us about collective minds, both human and AI, in the digital age. All right. I think we're really close, but let's welcome him and maybe that'll make the time.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. And thank you for the technical support. And thank you everyone for staying also for the second talk. I'm Fabian, and I'm super excited to talk to you today. It's my first talk here at Penn, and I also started recently last fall, just a little while before Taro started. And today I'm going to introduce some of my research on collective minds in the digital age, and will then focus more specifically on a recent project that I did with old friends and collaborators in Berlin at the Max Planck Institute. So at the broadest scale, I'm interested in what shapes the emergent phenomena in human collectives. And to answer this question, we obviously must go beyond the traditional focus on the individual mind. And this helps us then to understand how collectives shape our beliefs, culture, knowledge, and the decisions we make. But in the digital age, there's another crucial ingredient we need to take into account, and this is intelligent machines or AI systems that increasingly mediate, influence, and potentially reshape the dynamics of our society. And examples, there are many examples, and they range from bots trading stocks, recommender systems, redistributing cultural items, or search engines that give us a new access to information. But it also includes content feeds like the ones we have on TikTok that deliver entertainment and news, or large language models that potentially reshape the content and style of a text we've written, or other sophisticated deep learning models that drive innovation in science or technology, for instance, by finding new proteins and understanding their functions. And all of these systems are already shaping the social cultural dynamics of our world today. So my overall current work doesn't only focus on the collective phenomena that arise in humans, but it's also very much concerned with hybrid systems where humans are brought into contact with intelligent machines or in AI systems. And I'm particularly interested in the feedback loops that go on between these distinct entities. So on the one hand, we know that these intelligent machines, they act human because they've been fed all this human-generated data, and this allows them to behave realistically and also provide useful outputs that we can use. And we use them increasingly often when we interact with these machines in numerous daily contexts on social media, when we use search engines, recommender systems, or other AI assistant tools. And methodologically, to study this, I follow several approaches ranging from computational mathematical modeling of complex collective systems. That's my original background. But I'm also increasingly using observational studies like drawing on social and cultural field data. And more recently, I conduct and I plan to conduct other behavioral experiments involving humans and machines to understand these feedbacks better. Intellectually, I think I'm very much influenced by the thinking in cultural evolution research. And we've recently argued that cultural evolution could be a well-suited framework to study the interplay between humans and machines. So in today's talk, I give a first brief introduction to this concept of machine culture, like a systematic framework to help us understand human culture in the digital age. And then I will talk a little more about a recent study that is influenced by this thinking, where we ran a field experiment on TikTok to investigate how the platform's algorithm shapes the content we see. So the idea of machine culture is, as I said, fully based on the overall idea in cultural evolution, which is highly interdisciplinary, with key contributions from fields including anthropology, psychology, evolutionary biology, and cognitive science. And while there are certain disagreements in the field, I would say, there's a broad consensus that culture evolves. So cultural change can be understood as an evolutionary process that's mainly driven by three very familiar processes, which is variation, transmission, and selection. So by examining how cultural artifacts emerge, how variation is created, how they're transmitted, like what happens when we pass them on from human to human, and who we copy from, by understanding this, which is a type of selection, gives us a tool to reason about why culture behaves and evolves the way it does. And what we argue now is that machine culture, or what we argue in machine culture, is that these processes are all mediated by machines nowadays. So first, we have machines contributing to kind of the cultural variation by generating novel artifacts, though we don't still quite understand what are the differences between those machine and human artifacts. Second, algorithms play a big role in the transmission of culture, because every time they interact with it, they might transform it in numerous ways. And third, algorithmic selection alters our encounters with cultural artifacts. So instead of copying from a human, we might encounter the cultural artifact because it has been recommended to us by an algorithm. So in a recent study, we were interested in exactly this type of machine selection, and investigated how feed algorithms shape the distribution of content we encounter online. So specifically, we asked how quickly and to what extent does the algorithm tune kind of the platform's overall content distribution in a personalized way, based on users' interests and their interactions with the platform. And I think this question is particularly relevant in the context of cultural evolution, because when algorithms amplify interest-aligned content too strongly, this whole thing departs very much from traditional forms of learning, where individuals might be exposed to culture from a diverse set of peers. And this narrowing may contribute or constrain human exploration in a sense, and also limit our ability to discover new topics and perspectives in the digital world we're living in. So as a case study, as I already mentioned, we focused on TikTok, which is especially interesting in this context because it's a kind of like an extreme case of an algorithm-driven ecosystem. As most of you know, on TikTok, it's a video sharing platform, and it hosts like a vast repertoire of content across entertainment, politics, and more, and it enables users to create, engage with highly viral and user-generated media. So crucially, I think what's special about TikTok, in contrast to other platforms that have been studied before, is that their content discovery is really only guided by the algorithm or by the recommender system, where on other platforms, the search is also guided by the input of users, like, okay, I'm searching for A or B, or their social networks, which these platforms also have in the background. So the For You feed, it's what the feed on TikTok is called, curates each user's content diet primarily based on their explicit and implicit interactions with previously encountered videos. And when watching a video, users can engage with it. They can like it, rewatch it, share it, they can follow the content creator, all of which provides feedback to the algorithm, which then can, in this continuous feedback loop, rapidly adapt to individuals' user preferences, but also collect more collective trends on the platform. So previous research on TikTok has identified its potentially addictive nature, the influence on our social connectedness if we spend time on the platform. And it also has looked into a little bit into the role of like user algorithm feedback loops. But how and to what extent TikTok really shapes the content distribution based on users' interests is not so well understood, at least in a quantitative sense. So to study this question, we performed something with a funny name, like a sock puppet audit. And the basic idea behind that is that you create artificial users that closely mimic the behavior of real users. And this allows you to study user platform interactions in a controlled way, because you can tune your bots in the way you like them to behave. And the good thing is it all happens in the realistic environment of the platform itself. But it seems super easy, but the process can be quite cumbersome, because often it requires like a manual setup of these bots, and you have to like create email addresses for each of the bots. You have to register them manually and so on. But when all this is done, it's nice because you can let them run automatically on the platform. And so they scroll through the content feed and they interact with the platform autonomously. And this enables our systematic observation of what's going on there, depending on their different behavioral profiles. So on the right-hand side, you see this schematic depiction of the stream of videos that users encounter. And time runs from the bottom to the top. And videos are colored according to their content. They're like green if they're aligned with the user's interests, and they're red if the content doesn't match the user's interest. Now, to decide if a video is aligned with the interest we give to the bot, we use a large language model in the back end. We use ChatGPT 3 or GPT 3.5, so it's been a while since we collected the data, using the prompt on the bottom of the slide. And if the language model gives a positive feedback about the content, then the bot will signal this to the platform and will do something. And it will like rewatch the video a random number of times. It will like it. Sometimes it will follow the content creator to give feedback to the platform. And this audit then allows us to collect a rich data set of, first of all, the videos itself, but also the feedback. So for each video, we know like which hashtags were used, the duration, the number of likes as a proxy for popularity, the video description. And for each bot, we get such a sequence. And in this sequence of videos, they're either aligned or not aligned, red and green. And to run some analysis on this, we transform the sequence of videos into a binary time series, S, which is essentially 0 if the video does not, and 1 if the video aligned with the bot's interest. This allows us to compute like further quantities, such as the time-dependent rate of interest-aligned videos, R of t, as like the convolution of this binary signal with a uniform kernel. But we can also, for instance, look at C of t, which is just the cumulative count of videos over time during the experiment. So these quantities allow us then to really like study the degree of amplification. But these 3 quantities can only be used if we have something like a meaningful baseline to compare to. And the baseline is always like a tricky thing in these field experiments, because what is it? Like we thought about it, and what we come up is the following. Like the problem about a truly neutral baseline is that, first of all, TikTok changes a lot. So it behaves differently on Tuesdays than on Fridays. And also bots that are really neutral, it doesn't really mean, we don't really know what that means. Like you can program a bot that doesn't like anything, that just scrolls through, or you can program a bot that likes everything, but then they're typically kicked off the platform. So we had to come up with an alternative. And one alternative we came up to is the first baseline. It's essentially looking at the average rate of content-aligned videos in the first part of the experiment before like a substantial increase in the number of recommendations, or like before amplification kicks in. And the second baseline is essentially looking at the average rate of the content, say with respect to interest A, in the other condition where the bot is essentially interested in something else. So with these two baselines at hand, we went into the analysis. Overall, the experiments we looked at had 3 conditions. So 2 single interest conditions where bots were interested in food and gaming. I mean, we can argue about the topics we chose, but it had certain reasons that I can discuss after the talk. And then also a dual interest bot dual interest bots that were interested in both of these topics. We had 12 bots per condition, and roughly our protocol was that bots take day shifts and night breaks, and activity was essentially chunked into 100 videos that they watched at a time during one session. And this took us approximately 3 months to do. So on average, in the end, each bot ended up watching 3,000 videos within a week until we shut them down. With that, we can also jump now into the results and see what's going on with the amplification. Let me see. Sorry. Okay. So first of all, we looked at the overall amplification and I'm going to show 2 examples of each, the gaming and the food condition. And we see that there's a very strong amplification of interest-aligned content happening in both conditions indicated by this green solid wobbly line here, especially at later times. And you can see that, or you can appreciate this more if you compare it to the 2 baselines that I discussed before. And the same holds true for the dual interest bots, interested in gaming and food, where R is again depicted in green. But interestingly, the dynamics somewhat richer. In some cases, amplification is driven by both topics that are color coded.
Remind me what the y-axis are.
The y-axis, oh, sorry, yeah. So it's just R. It's kind of the rate of interest-aligned content. Yeah, it's not the binary time series. It's more like in some cases, we only use it for visualization to see how for some analysis, we use the binary time series and sometimes the smooth one. And so sometimes the dynamics is in a way that the topics alternate. So in the first case, you see that gaming dominates and then it's taken over by food. In some other cases, for the dual interest bots, it's really only one topic dominates throughout the whole experiment. If we look at the mean levels of amplification across conditions, the picture is confirmed. So there are many videos aligned with the bot's interest overall, as compared to what we would expect based on the baselines. And in the most extreme case, the gaming condition, bots end up seeing like 67% of the time gaming. So roughly 2 out of 3 videos are interest aligned. Next, we took a closer look at the onset of amplification. So when does it happen? And we used like a method for change point detection for binary time series, and it extracted the times t0, which marked the start of significant amplification. And second, we also computed the slope during that, or at this time point t0. And we find that amplification onsets generally very quickly, with gaming being the quickest topic to amplify. Specifically, it happens only roughly 70 videos after the start of the experiment, which corresponds to like on average like half an hour of scrolling. And the slopes are consistent with that. So again, showing gaming to be the quickest topic. As in the case of the overall amplification, we find that the dual interest spots are somehow in between the single interest conditions. After the rapid onset, the key question becomes now, how do these dynamics unfold over longer time? In particular, we observed that while interest-aligned content is heavily amplified, the feed also includes content that falls out of this scope, and this raises the question: what is the type of strategy that the algorithm is using? And to explore this, we applied like a simple Markov model to analyze the transitions between interest-aligned and non-interest content. And fitting this model to the data allows us to extract like transition probabilities between the states, where the state's interest and non-interest corresponds to the observation S in our binary time series. And in a nutshell, what we find looking at these transition matrices is that the algorithm creates a rather strong self-reinforcing dynamic. So once you enter the interest-aligned state, the probability of remaining there is rather high. At the same time, the algorithm intermittently injects non-interest content, indicating like a strategy that sort of balances this reinforcement and occasional exploration. Importantly, we also observe differences in the transition dynamics between the states. Specifically, the bias towards interest state is significantly stronger, again, like in the gaming condition. We then followed up with the same approach, like for the dual interest spots, where we have a Markov model of 3 states. And yeah, we find that amplification is mostly driven by gaming again. But interestingly, the transition probabilities from one interest state to the non-interest state are generally higher than those between the 2 interest states. So this suggests that the algorithm tends to switch between extended periods of one topic rather than interleaving both topics in short alternating sequences. So yeah, while this Markov modeling gives us insights into the transitions, the different types of content, it doesn't really show us much about the nature of the content itself. So to better understand what kinds of videos are being amplified, we next looked at how the rate R relates to key content properties, specifically the popularity, which is always interesting for recommendations, and also the duration of the videos shown to the bots. So this allows us to explore whether the algorithm preferentially amplifies certain types of content beyond just aligning with the user's interest. So when we relate the average popularity of videos during the different phases of the experiment with the degree to which they are aligned with the interest, so with R, we see like a clear negative correlation. And doing the same for the duration, we find exactly the opposite. So longer videos, the more it's amplified content. So this basically means that the more the algorithm traps us within like interest niches, the less popular and the longer the content becomes. In other words, the algorithm catches like your attention with short and popular videos in the beginnings, also to test out what you like. And then it drives you into longer and less popular kind of niche content areas. Last but not least, we also examined the relationship between exploration of new content and the extent of amplification of interest-aligned content. So to do this, we had a really kind of crude way of quantifying exploration as the number of unique hashtags that you encounter, or that our bots encounter, normalized by the total number of hashtags in this run. And when plotted over time, this measure reveals like a characteristic power law that you would also expect in other sort of innovation processes, or observed similar in other types of discovery processes. But the key question now becomes, how is the final value of U, this value U, related to the interest, to the degree of interest-aligned content amplification? Somewhat we can quantify using like a small c, so the cumulative number of interest-aligned videos over time divided by the total number of videos. And again, we see like a strong negative correlation. And this means essentially that across conditions, so for gaming, food, and also the mixed condition, the fewer novel topics, so the more we are kind of driven into these niches, the less novel topics we're exposed to, which is kind of intuitive. But it also, so it means also that the algorithm doesn't only narrow you down onto a certain topic, it also means that the content within this interest-aligned content becomes increasingly repetitive and less diverse over time. So in other words, the higher the amplification of interest-aligned content, the lower the rate of exploration on these platforms. So yeah, as we have seen, feed algorithms play a major role, or can play a major role, in the selection of cultural artifacts. And we found that TikTok's For You feed rapidly adapts to like content distributions in response to user interactions, and that amplification of interest-aligned content reduces exposure to novel and diverse topics. But what does this mean for like culture overall, as a collective process? I think individual level findings alone can capture like the broader dynamics. However, they can form like theoretical work to explore the systematic consequences of algorithmic mediation, kind of which brings me back to the more broader goals of my research. For instance, we've recently developed a computational model for cultural evolution that studies the interplay between more traditional types of social learning and algorithmic mediation. And this model and other works or other theory work I'm currently involved in, already allows to generate exciting hypotheses about the interaction between humans and machines. And I'm excited to soon run like behavioral experiments to test these hypotheses. And with that, I'll conclude. And if there's still time, I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you. Yeah.
First of all, if I understand correctly, the word known direction thing is Bob and we like the Bob for Nikolai and inverse behavior and it's only affected by the feed.
Yeah. So there's only like influence in one direction. So it's not a real like, we can't claim it's a. I introduced the whole thing as feedback loops that I'm interested in, but here it's not a feedback loop where interest of the bot actually update after they've seen more like that. That would be like a next step. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, from the feed or like more broader.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Knowing that, would you say that this is essentially sort of like reverse engineering of the recommendation algorithm of the TikTok?
Yeah.
I mean, if you grab someone, like key personnel from the TikTok company and somehow make it actually heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you get this?
So I mean, we're more interested in like kind of these more broad behavioral sort of insights. I think if I would talk to a person in CS, I'm not a CS person, what they do when they reverse engineer an algorithm, I think they have more like specific insights, even more detailed controlled experiments. How they do it in the field, I'm not sure, but in a way it's kind of reverse engineering what happens. Yeah. So we study what happens sort of as a reaction to the actions we take. But I think, I don't know if this runs under or what is your, maybe I didn't really understand your question. Like,
it's kind of assume that this recommendation algorithm is a black box.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out, okay, how it actually.
Yeah, in that sense, it's reverse engineering. Yeah, in that sense, we.
Saw that this recommendation algorithm is already known to not to us as commercial classification, but at least known to the company.
Yeah.
Like,
So you to rephrase your question, why don't you just ask the people from TikTok? Yeah. So first of all, that's not possible because they won't give you this multi-billion-dollar secret. And second, I think, I mean, it's really hard to. It's really hard. First of all, it's really hard to get data from the platform. Like they shut down certain APIs in the recent time, and they simply wouldn't tell you. And on top of that, I think they also wouldn't know because these types of kind of machine culture, machine behavioral experiments are done because these systems are so complex that you can't really predict what happens if you do what we did. I think. I mean. What we found essentially supports our intuition that it amplifies the interest because that's why we're using it after all. But it just hasn't been quantified before, at least to my knowledge. So that's why we engaged in it, so to say.
yeah. I think it makes perfect sense that they might even know that not know about.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, please.
And so I have two questions about comparison, sort of interesting comparisons or baselines that as to whether you thought of them or not. So one potential comparison between that you can make with this experiment is some characterization of the degree of amplification of long-time users' feeds, right? Which would tell you maybe maybe if you interact with the feed for a long time, you see this degree of amplification and then
absolutely,
adjust to it.
Yeah.
Or maybe this experiment sort of perfectly crystallizes the extent to which my 16-year-old daughter is only seeing the same thing for hours at a time. And then the other comparison I might be interested in is the extent to which a feed is all one topic in a situation where the user has a little more control, like a search situation. So I'm not the person to tell you which social media would be more like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I imagine, you know, like YouTube, where you're searching for videos,
absolutely.
The user has a little bit more control over their feed, and you can characterize the degree of amplification like in the YouTube feed versus this feed. Because what that would control for is maybe, you know, maybe if you left the users to their own devices and they would choose even more amplification than TikTok is.
I don't think so. I think if they could actually actively search more, or if it's like, because what some people argue is that the real novelty about TikTok is not its algorithm, but it's kind of the design, sort of the user interface. It's just like super much focused on the scrolling, which makes sense. So it would be interesting. There are similar studies on like all types of like Reddit, which has introduced like sort of algorithmic recommendations, YouTube, Twitter, of course. And they sometimes, I mean, most of these people or most of the scholars in the field, I think they very much focus on like political polarization and like political content. And we wanted to zoom out a little bit. But what they find when looking at politics is that it's not clear. Like sometimes these algorithms contribute to polarization in a broad sense. Sometimes they do not. With respect to your first question, like comparing to actual like user interaction data, this project started in a collaboration like or we wanted to collaborate with people that have actual data donations from people, where they would get their demographics and interests and would then just see what they saw. But this failed, and then we went to the bots. So, but it's super interesting, yeah. And I would still be interested in doing it, but it's hard to get the data, yeah. Yeah, Taro.
But you still have the bots that you specify different genders, different age.
Yeah, so we have the data that they saw, yeah.
I see.
And I mean the bots, they probably by now they wouldn't even work anymore because the source code of like TikTok has already changed again. But we could run the same experiments, but it's would again like it's like a snapshot. It's hard to do this over extended period of times without having a software developer that is like free, like yeah. Yes, please.
I probably missed this. What was defined as an interaction, and how do you think, like, I don't use TikTok, but there's probably a lot of different ways to interact, right? Like to spend time on video, to comment.
Yeah.
And some of those interactions could actually potentially dissuade like the content you see, like, I don't know, negative comment on video. I don't know.
Yeah.
So how did that play in?
Yeah, so we exactly, like it would be super interesting to have hundreds of thousands of bots and really like change just little tiny bits, like what's the effect on rewatching, what's the effect liking. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to give like the maximum signal to the platform that we like this stuff. So we did all at once, like we rewatched a random number of times, we liked it, and we followed the content creator. But of course, like it would be very cool to tune that and to have like many more conditions to tease that apart. Yeah. Yes, please.
So if I understood, you had two topics, like a cooking one and a.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you know that you can generalize from two? Right? I mean, maybe it's completely different if you look at like woodworking talk.
Of course. And that's the interesting bit. Like, I think one of the interesting parts, maybe, or at least to me, that was interesting, that you see like sort of topic specific differences. And the question is, why is that? Is it just on the supply side that you have more of gaming content because like the gaming community is completely crazy? Or does it also give you like, or does it also give you sort of some sort of idea about their kind of cognitive processes, right? Like, how do you have to recommend to gaming people different to food people? We don't have enough data, I think, to answer these types of questions, but in principle, if you have that, that would be super interesting. How do you like hook people with different interests more or less?